This is my last day of summer. And I'm spending it gloriously.
Like the 24th is a teacher classroom day. There should be no meetings or PD that day.
In half a mile, keep right at the fork to continue on I-895 South. Follow signs for Baltimore Harbor Tunnel Thruway, Annapolis. Keep right at the fork to continue on I-895 South. Continue on Baltimore Harbor Tunnel Thruway for 9 miles.
colleagues that I know that resigned last year said how easy it was. They also filled out a form, giving them a chance to explain why they were leaving. Colleagues that retired were overwhelmed with the paperwork and had trouble getting help from HR.
GPS signal lost. Keep right at the fork to continue on I-895B South. Follow signs for I-97 South, Maryland 2 South. Keep right at the fork to continue on I-895B South. In 1.5 miles, take the I-97 South exit toward Annapolis. take the I-97 South exit toward Annapolis. Take the I-97 South exit. Continue for 3/4 of a mile. In a 1/4 mile, merge onto I-97 South. Continue on I-97 South for 4 miles. In 2 miles, take exit 13 for Maryland 174 West. mile, take exit 13 for Maryland 174 West. Take exit 13, then keep left at the fork. Keep left at the fork, then continue straight onto George Kloss Boulevard. Continue straight onto George Kloss Boulevard, then turn right onto Quarterfield Park Drive. Right onto Quarterfield Park Drive, then you will arrive at your destination.
Compulsory regular guy meals.
Fucking think, like, your job, like, basically all you do, if you are, like, not a backbencher, if you're a public facing member of the party, is you just do small talk.
Yeah.
That's your job. That's horrifying.
Brutal.
I guess, like, and then the other thing was that it looks like the Republican Senate committee, like the official fundraising arm, has like basically cut off Dr. Oz and also cut off Ron Johnson.
Very interesting
in
there.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And like that could be like more than anyone, getting him out would be that would be a boom. That would
Well,
be a
for
boom.
me, just personally, as someone who hates him and doesn't
In a quarter mile, merge onto I-97 South.
an individual Wisconsin-based level. And yeah, that would actually be a pickup for the Democrats. Wow. I mean, if this happens, if they like get a bigger majority in the Senate, and the House is close, that's a big epic bag for the Republicans.
What, I mean, isn't it like, can we blame most of this on the Dobbs decision? Is that what's going on here?
I mean, yeah, it does look like
Continue on I-97 South for 13 miles.
that's been a huge mobilizer.
I hate to say it, notice though.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, that's why people for many years thought Republicans would never do it, because for precisely this reason. But that's the difference. That's the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. Democrats catastrophize short-term losses so much that they can't conceive of doing anything for a broader project, because that might cause us to lose in the near term. But yeah, large, big-time political projects are going to have negative costs as they're accumulating, and that can mean you lose winnable Senate races because you have two extreme candidates. But it means that your party over time gets more ideologically coherent and is able to push things like abortion bans. And then you have like evidence for your supporters that you can actually get things done and that they should bother supporting you, and they do.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's the reason that Bernie was never going to be a Goldwater or Reagan 76 figure.
Yeah.
of celebrity who thrives on public attention, Kushner is so press shy that most Americans don't know what his voice sounds like. I mean,
I remember when
that sucks for them. Man, that's all I'll say.
I remember he had that press conference during the Trump presidency when he came out and he talked, and there was a moment where everyone was like, "Damn, dude, that's what he sounds like. That's not good."
Do you know that was the last tweet that Brett Stevens liked before he left Twitter? It was from Patrick Howley, who is one of the handful of people who was deemed too weird to work at the Daily Caller. If you remember him, you have to be, let's say, solidly a millennial to remember him. But anyway, he made a post that was Jared Kushner's famous Rose Garden address, where he said, "I did not do anything," you know, and it was just captioned simply, "Jared Kushner's gay little nerd voice," and it was the last thing Brett Stevens ever liked before he left.
When it was reported that Kushner had scored a 7-figure deal to write a memoir of his time as a White House advisor, many assumed it would be a dry affair that mainly talked up his work on the Abraham Accords, folks.
We love the Abraham
Accords.
Accords.
Abraham Accords has
Changed the world.
Yeah, the Alan Dershowitz, Mike Pompeo.
The way they push
Abraham
that shit,
Accords.
like this is Camp David all over again. It is so hilarious. We're just formalizing these like ties between the Gulf states and Israel that have existed for decades now.
Yeah, all these countries that have not been at odds with each other since 1973.
Yeah.
It says, but it turns out Kushner is more similar to his father-in-law than we realized.
No.
Breaking history is like the more respectable Javanka version of Trump's $75 burn book, Our Journey Together. Excerpts and early reporting show that Kushner does plenty of score settling in the 512-page memoir.
Good
Oh,
Lord.
God.
Oh, thank you.
Thank God for this.
fuck.
Thank God for this drama report.
Oh my God, the power broker's got to be more exciting.
Dropping surprising allegations and stirring up new drama with former colleagues in the Trump administration, where he served as senior advisor to the president. Here's a running list of all the hot breaking history gossip ahead of the book's
Hot goss.
August 23rd
Hot
release.
steaming gas.
This is how you would get Robert Caro to kill himself. I'm straight up looking at
Why
this.
would I even bother finishing this now?
Yeah, master of the White House social engagement wing. Book 2.
Volume 2, The Hamburger Years. Okay, first piece of hot goss. Trump warned him that Tom Brady was after Ivanka. In parentheses, but he wasn't.
Oh wow.
Okay.
That's amazing.
It says, Kushner got off on the wrong foot with his future father-in-law. He writes that his first interaction with Trump came in 2007 when he was publisher of the New York Observer. According to Forward, Kushner says he received a letter from Trump expressing annoyance about his low placement on the paper's annual power list. Please stop sending me your paper so I don't have to read bullshit like this anymore, Trump wrote to Kushner. 2 years later, Kushner had started dating Ivanka and their relationship was getting serious. At her urging, he scheduled a lunch with her father and broke the news that Ivanka was converting to Judaism. Well, let me ask you a question, Trump asked Kushner. Why does she have to convert? Why can't you convert? Kushner replied that she had made the decision on her own and was comfortable with it.
Convert to what?
Episcopalian? Episcopalianism?
Presbyterian Methodist.
Pres Lutheran?
Yeah.
He goes, that's great. Trump then remarks, most people think I'm Jewish anyway. Most of my friends are Jewish. I have all these awards from synagogues. They love me in Israel. He has all these awards from synagogues.
Most likely to succeed.
Biggest goy.
He added that he hoped Kushner was serious because Tom Brady, the iconic NFL quarterback, was also courting his daughter. Though Trump has been publicly talking up a potential Tom Brady-Ivanka pairing for years, it appears neither Brady nor Ivanka ever expressed any interest in dating each other. And upon further investigation, Brady was newly married to Gisele Bündchen when Trump issued this warning to Kushner. Okay, like, the Trump trying to, like, marry off his daughter to Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Because, like, in his mind, Tom Brady is
He's the ultimate man.
He's the ultimate
Yes.
man, the ultimate American. He's doing his own Bene Gesserit breeding program just through press releases where he's like, Betty, you're saying Tom Brady asked my daughter out to dinner. He took her to Benihana. Folks.
Can you imagine it if they did it, folks? Can you imagine it? I have. I've imagined it a lot. I've drawn it a little bit. You want to see?
A lot of people say they say Trump as if people like grains of sand.
Yeah, it's like a Bene Gesserit program to create like the first normal member of the family. Like the first member of the family who can like talk to somebody and come off as somewhat normal.
Yeah. No, but yeah, like he's just like, because he wants the Tom Brady brand associated with Trump. It's like, what is Tom Brady? He's the winningest quarterback of all time, which if you're in America means you're the #1 winner in world history. So for him to sire a child with his daughter, which mean that the Trump bloodline would remain winners for the next 1,000 years.
Well, yeah, his child would finally be. They would make an issue that didn't have the, let's say, Trump curse of the weirdest affect I've ever seen. He's the only one who can overcome the curse just by like sheer force of personality and like Sudafed abuse. But like the rest of them, like we remember the Eric Trump special, and like Don Jr. and like they're all so off. Like they have just the most severe fucking anti-charisma, and Jared's exactly the same, and so is everyone else they marry. And Tom Brady's the first guy that can like do a video into a cell phone camera and just, like kind of be normal.
Make eye contact?
Yes.
Yeah, with Brady and the family, I'll be kissing my sons on the mouth. Eric, smooch up.
Right, that's
Fuck her up, Don.
That's the only weird thing he did.
Next piece of hot goss. Trump spoiled his engagement surprise. On the second meeting, when Kushner stuck into the office to secretly tell Trump he was going to propose, Trump intercommed with Ivanka as soon as he left to alert her that an engagement was imminent. Kushner ended up proposing that night in his apartment, which his brother, Josh, covered in rose petals and candles after taking her to see the musical Wicked.
If I ever asked my brother to do something like that, he would demand I change my last name.
God damn it, his brother covered his rose petals and candles. Like, this is the fantasy of like a 50-plus woman who works at like reception at your office.
Yeah, like, has billions of dollars ever been wasted on someone like quite like this? Like, Jesus fucking Christ.
This is a great piece of hot goss. I'm glad New York Magazine included this. The Secret Service actually loved him.
Okay.
Though you may have heard that Jared and Ivanka would not let the Secret Service agents on their protection detail use the bathroom in their swanky DC home, Kushner says that's untrue. He claims they offered to let the agents use their bathroom, but they declined, saying they wanted a larger space they could use as a command post. I need a larger toilet to use as a command post. My turrets, this command post cannot take my turrets. They're too large.
You know, there's such a thing as too much fiber. If you're able to survey and scout while taking a shit.
This is a really good one. It says, Kushner also says the Secret Service assigned him the codename Mechanic because they thought he was amazing at his job. They had observed me quietly and methodically fixing problems behind the scenes during the presidential campaign, he says.
No, they have. What the fuck are you talking
Cool
about?
guys with guns all thought I was actually the coolest person in
But
the
they
White
don't
House.
notice what you're doing. They're like, oh, he's calling he's calling the National Enquirer guy to like delay the story about his father-in-law chasing a girl around like Beetle Bailey's boss.
What do you think? Okay, if there was any aspect of Jared's personality or character or professional conduct that earned him the moniker Mechanic from the Secret Service agent, do you think it was because he was good at fixing things behind the scenes? What do you think's going on here?
I think it's an ironic joke. It's like, oh, mechanic, work with your hands, huh? You know, like.
I think maybe it's just because he was really oily. Okay, next piece of hot goss. Bannon threatened to break him in half. Kushner says that he had many clashes with fellow Trump advisor Steve Bannon and found himself woefully unprepared when Bannon, a black belt in the dark arts of media manipulation.
Wow.
He's on a black belt in karate. Finally declared war on him. Kushner writes that Bannon threatened him in the White House cabinet room when he told him that he had to stop leaking negative information about Gary Cohn, the senior economic advisor to the press. Kushner writes that Bannon responded, "Cohn's the one leaking on me. Jared, right now, you're the one undermining the president's agenda." He continued, his eyes intense and voice escalating into a yell. "And if you go against me, I will break you in half. Don't fuck with me."
And he got absolutely comprehensively washed, rinsed, and owned by Jared fucking Kushner.
Yet the mechanic checked his oil.
Kushner says Bannon threatened him again when he called Maggie Haberman of the New York Times at the urging of the White House Chief of Staff in an attempt to clean up on a story about Trump's disappointment with his senior staff. "How fucking dare you leak on me? If you leak on me, I can leak on you 28 ways from Sunday," Bannon said, according to Kushner.
God, this fucking blustery Mick. Just nothing but empty threats out at his ass 3 fucking months.
I'm gonna fuck you, bro.
Oh my,
This guy's not really the dark lord of neo-rape fascism we all have to worry about.
Oh my god, yeah, he's taking a 28-year-old staffer's 5 hands and watching Ray Donovan coming up with these fucking shitty lines. What a fucking loser.
One of the biggest fucking losers of all time.
Do you remember when Bannon said, I spent several years running companies in Asia?
Yeah, right.
Steven Seagal in Asia.
It was so great because, like, Trump basically just booked him off of the fucking rubbish heap. And he's given this insane opportunity. I'm going to do it. I'm going to reshape America, my image. And this fucking Fauntleroy effortlessly turfs him immediately.
Maybe he was called the mechanic because, you know, mechanic from the classic Charles Bronson movie.
Yes.
Mechanic is a killer for hire.
Yeah.
He
Put a contract out on him.
put a hit on him.
I heard you leak on Bad Boys.
Two quick hits. He joked that getting Bannon fired was one of his greatest accomplishments. Then he generously encouraged Trump to pardon Bannon. I mean, this is not really gossip, but this is not hot gossip.
No, this is him saying, I'm a
I'm a very
I'm a
cool
very
guy.
good little
I'm a
boy.
very good guy.
I got rid of the bad yelling man, and the Secret Service says that I was cool.
Yeah, it's amazing for a man of this height to suck his own cock like this for 500 pages.
He indirectly ruined Christie's shot at chief of staff. Kushner claims he also responded magnanimously when Trump considered making Chris Christie his chief of staff about halfway through his presidency. Though the former New York, the fact that he was actually considering that is really good. Though the former New Jersey governor put his father in prison as a federal prosecutor, Trump eventually pardoned Charles Kushner too. When Trump asked Kushner what he thought of bringing his adversary into a top spot in the White House, Kushner recalled telling his father-in-law that he was fine with it. I joked that Christie might be better at Homeland Security. He can close the George Washington Bridge. Maybe he could close the border. A reference to the Bridgegate scandal that embroiled the former New Jersey governor. But Kushner suggests karma came for Christie anyway. He didn't get the job because he was about to release a book in which he trashed the Kushner family and he couldn't stop its publication. Ironically, Christie's petty obsession with using my family to get media attention had destroyed his dream opportunity to rehabilitate his image and finish his political career, Kushner writes.
Another big fat dick fucking owned by Jared Kushner.
I would say that
President Barack Obama just called on every Democrat to step up to protect our once in a lifetime majorities. If just 4,000 grassroots Democrats enter Barack's powerful calls, we could clinch our can't-miss midnight goal and strengthen our efforts to defeat every Republican who threatens our Democrats. Will you rush $20 to the DCCC to expand our House majority? Dems. Me/3R6PTK. The last time Republicans held power. ... They pushed tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy. ... They tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act. ... And they incited a deadly insurrection at our nation's capital. We can't let them ever hold the majority again. And when Barack personally calls us to step up, we wouldn't dare let him down. Can we count on you to chip in $20 to elect House Democrats and hand Trump's House Republicans a stunning rebuke? Dems. Me/3R6PTK. Thanks. DCCC, Image 1. JPEG.
One day, he had just marched out of a contentious meeting in the Oval Office, Kushner writes. Ivanka was walking down the main hallway in the West Wing when she passed him. Unaware of his heated state of mind, she said, "Hello, Chief." Kelly shoved her out of the way and stormed by. He wasn't hurt and didn't make a big deal out of the altercation, but in his rage, Kelly had shown his true character. In his recounting, Kushner writes that about an hour later, Kelly visited Ivanka's second-floor West Wing office to offer what he described as a meek apology, which she accepted. When asked about the incident, Kelly told the Post, "I don't recall anything like you described. It is inconceivable that I would ever..."
In a quarter mile, take the US 50 West US 301 South exit toward Washington, Richmond.
Shove a woman. Inconceivable, never happened, Kelly told the paper in an email. Would never intentionally do something like that. Also, don't remember ever apologizing to her for something that I didn't do. I don't remember.
this one's weird.
Take the US 50 west exit, then merge onto US 301 south.
Right? Like, because it's like, I mean, I could see Kushner wholesale lying about this, right? But, okay, I don't remember intentionally shove. I would never intentionally shove a woman. And we did talk about how Kelly, by all rights, should have probably suicide bombed Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. If he had any honor at all.
Right. If he believed all the stupid shit he talked about, right? Or if he even cared about his son dying.
Yeah.
Could this be his, you know, that feeling breaking through? And he's like, oh, at least I can shoulder check his dog. The one kid he likes.
I mean, Kelly, that's another kind of stout Irish guy.
Another
right?
Irishman, fucking
Yeah.
bite the dust.
Not quite fat, though.
He's
Not a
sorta-
fatty though.
He's kind of.
He's a
thick. He's thick.
He's a fire plug.
Yeah, exactly. Classic fire player. Classic hockey player.
Yeah. So only like the endomorphic thin ass like banshee Irish are invulnerable to the Kushner.
Yeah, I feel like if you bumped into Kelly, it would just feel like one of those two densely packed beanbags.
John Kelly envelops Ivanka in a breath. This is his hug. He hugged her in the hallway.
What do you
I like this. He just said, "Hello, Chief," and then he just checked her into a fucking bomb.
Do you think this in any format?
I can see it happening where like it was just he got out of the White House, the Oval Office, and was just kind of incensed and had tunnel vision, and then she's just like,
And also, as we talked about,
"Hello,
like,
Chief. Hey guys," and then he just like brushes past her. And
huge coward.
Yeah.
Every day, the president shits directly on everything he's ever believed in.
Right
and he
into his
just
mouth.
takes it. So of course he's gonna like, oh, there's Ivanka, there's his daughter. I'm gonna fucking bump into her. Just a perfect little penny kick down, bitch ass move.
well, there's another big ass move that Kelly did. Kelly secretly listened to Trump's calls. God, can you imagine that?
No way. No way.
Kushner says that Kelly routinely listened in on Trump's phone calls, and the president only found out about it days before the Chief of Staff's departure on January 2nd, 2019. According to the New York Post, Kushner says Kelly's successor, Mick Mulvaney, raised the issue during a dinner at Vice President Mike Pence's residence. Before he departed, Mulvaney and I met with the president to discuss his upcoming schedule. Then Mulvaney handed Trump a document to sign. Mulvaney told Trump, "This will end the practice Kelly started of listening to all your phone calls." Mulvaney explained that Kelly had given himself the ability to listen surreptitiously to the president's calls, according to the account. The president was stunned at the invasion of privacy and ordered aides to end that immediately. I mean, obviously, I think like everyone's listening to every phone call in the White House.
Of course.
But like, I just thought it once again,
Oh my God.
like John Kelly, he's got like a secret black box room
Yeah.
of guys with like, they got the cans and they got the headphones on. There's like the tape reel is running, and they're just listening to
Yep.
every
Yep.
fucking phone call that's going on. Biggs.
You know, Gina Davis, she says she's in Mensa, but I don't buy it. I talked to her a few times, not that bright.
This is a good one. Trump said he hoped Alice Johnson wouldn't kill anyone after he commuted her sentence. In an excerpt provided to People, Kushner describes how he helped Kim Kardashian with her effort to have Alice Johnson's prison sentence commuted. In an Oval Office meeting in May 2018, after working closely with Kim Kardashian to vet the file, I presented Alice's case to the president, Kushner writes. White House counsel Don McGahn offered some pushback, accusing Johnson of being a drug kingpin. But Trump was open to the idea, so Kushner arranged for the fellow reality TV star to come to the Oval Office. She gracefully presented Alice's case to the president, Kushner says, of Kardashian. She knew the details backward and forward. McGahn went easy in his counter-arguments because he was starstruck, Kushner recalls. 2 days later, Trump called me early in the morning and said, "Let's do the part. Let's hope Alice doesn't go out." That was like, it's sort of like like Norman Mailer and William Buckley had like a murder off. They both got two guys in jail, and Mailer's guy immediately killed some woman.
Yeah.
And Buckley's guy only attempted to murder someone after getting out. Yeah.
No, Jack Henry Abbott, the waiver.
Yeah.
Like 2 days after he got out, he had an argument with the witness. a scary. Yeah, he got a scary diagnosis. So
Unfortunately,
get sympathy from a lot. And she's just like facing it. Just like, I don't care.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, something's weird with your thyroid. Who could have guessed?
unfortunately, though, he had to have a good chunk of his thyroid removed. And he wants everyone to know that that's why his voice sounds the way it is. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. This is not a piece of gossip at all. It's just Rupert Murdoch told him that Trump's 2020 Arizona loss was iron bad. Thanks for sharing that, Jared.
Okay.
People are really
In 2 miles, use the right 2 lanes to take the exit toward US 301 South.
What's the point of that? Just that Jared has media ambitions.
Just basically Murdoch and his former wife Wendy Dang are so close with Jared and Ivanka that they arranged to reunite the young couple after they split for a few months early in their courtship.
Oh, that's sweet.
Swingers, sounds like swinger stuff.
Yeah.
Is Cody there?
He was watching.
Below deck.
Yes, that's it. That's the rather tepid goss.
Lame. 500 fucking pages.
500 pages.
God.
Bullshit. Good God.
Who is reading Jared's book? I would love to get them and find them and put them in a cage or something. Because they shouldn't be walking around.
Oh god, it has to be someone who like dreams about being the Heritage Foundation, right? Like there's no one else. Like because the base, like they don't.
No, they hate Jared.
They either hate him or don't know him.
Right. It's got to be like, yeah, people who saw Trump as president were like, wow, they were able to solve the Latino problem without having to undermine themselves with their base. This is a real opportunity. Too bad he's not disciplined enough to make the most of it.
Exactly. It's like Marco Rubio supporters who went over to Trump and are like, well, he cut taxes.
Yeah.
That's the exact type of person who's in
Sickos.
uglier Republican Dan from Beats.
All right, let's get into it with. Okay. Oh, yes.
In half a mile, use the right 2 lanes to take the exit toward US 301 South.
Oh,
Have you been walking around naked?
Or wearing a large barrel with suspenders?
Yeah, do you have a splitter on your dick?
have your rags gotten to you, Tawdre? Do people mistake you for a leper?
Are you one of those abjects from Dark Souls?
Yeah.
Use the right 2 lanes to take the exit toward US 301 South, then keep left to continue on exit 13A.
Tired of the wagon wheel around your neck?
Are you sick of your?
Keep left to continue on exit 13A.
You do have those, okay? Are you sick of your t-shirts not being objectionable enough? Are you sick of not causing a confrontation with your t-shirt that references a certain controversial government post-World War II program?
Friends, are you tired of being mistaken for Viggo Mortensen in Crimes of the Future as you shuffle about in your dark rags? Well then, Chapo Trap House, I'm pleased to announce this plug.
Keep right to stay on exit 13A.
Books, new merchandise is finally available. The number one most commonly asked question can now be answered yes.
In a quarter mile, continue on to US 301 South.
The Zapata oil hats are now ready to
Also,
order
Zapata
again.
hat
Zapata
aisle
hoodies, Zapata hats, Zapata oil t-shirts. We got a whole trove of new merchandise we're very excited for. We have
Fed windbreakers.
We have a Fed windbreaker, the FBI anti-ADHD unit.
Yes.
That's available to all in windbreaker and hoodie form. We've got Jack Ruby Carousel Club t-shirt and hoodies. And of course, as Felix said, the classic Project Paperclip design will be the star
Continue on US 301 South for 1.5 miles.
of any, the birthdays,
Bar mitzvahs.
Well, like, you really shouldn't wear this in public if you're not Jewish. That's like,
But if you are Jewish, you are required to.
yeah, we were only able to do this because this was my idea.
Yeah. Yes.
But ChapoTrapHouse.shop is where you go for the hottest new merchandise drops. It's for dads, grads,
Yep.
trads. Everyone loves our hot new merchandise. Get that Zapata oil hat and stop bothering me about it.
Yep.
And right, once again, before I get into it with Aaron Good to talk about deep politics and the para-state of the intelligence and national security community and the organized crime that they represent, I would like to remind you one more time that tickets are still available for our fall tour. Come and see us this October in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Fort Lauderdale, Miami. Tickets available at ChapoTrapHouse.com/live.
Boom.
Without further ado, Aaron Good here to talk about his book, American Exception.
Wait.
Goodbye. Goodbye forever. You're gonna take a koozie with you? That'll be good. That's helpful. That's helpful. Did you change your mind? You change your mind? Okay. So not. Okay, so we want to. Is that Texas or Tennessee? Can you help me figure that out, then? Okay, no, we want the St. Patrick's Day Miller Lite one.
Ooh, that's a bad look.
Well, that's attached to the wall, so.
I think it's malignant. Ew. Right? It's just. Well, I guess get in the right lane. Close this. I think you're fine. Because that might be a turn on now. Talk about that. I'd rather pee in the parking lot. 10,000%. No, because it's still past this. Yeah. Here, this is music. He's trying to go to the same place. Oh man, I really have to pee now. Okay, how easily could I pee in my car? Into that? It's pretty big, which is nice. Oh shit, rips. Okay, cool. So yeah, this is like a standard way to get the same areas. And there's just a Walmart here. Don't know if I'll realize that. Don't know if I'll realize that. Okay. I'm guessing that's a lane. Yeah, okay. I think I should look at that hat. No.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto Excalibur Road.
Wait, this is like not it, I think. I think I did something stupid. I think I did something stupid. I mean, there's the Walmart sign. Okay, never mind. Purple chicken. Dude, this is gonna be tough for me. Okay. No following? No, I think keep going. Not too many cars so far, people. I think just keep going this way. Okay. Is there a faraway spot you could park in? That's pretty nifty, actually.
In 400 feet, you will arrive at your destination.
I'm gonna like pull off over there, I think we're good to cross. Oh, you can't get there from here. So do this. Yeah.
You've arrived.
You've arrived. You have arrived. She's hot as hell. Dun, 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 dun. Good call, dude. That fuck. This would also be a good spot for peeing if we went to that plan. Let's try. Park. Move this. Take that out. Unfortunately, I have a small penis. I have a short penis. Actually, ouch. Should we be pretty easy, actually.
Head northeast toward US 301 South.
In exception. All right, joining us now.
Head northeast toward US 301 South. Head northeast toward US 301 South. In 800 feet, slight right onto US 301 South. Take the next right onto US 301 South. Continue for 9 miles.
craphouse.com/live.
Boom.
Without further ado, Aaron Good here to talk about his book, American Exception. All right, joining us now is Aaron Good, making his second appearance on the Chapler Trap House program, collecting his two-time guest challenge coin. But Aaron, we're here today to talk about your book, American Exception. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Will. It's great to be here.
Aaron, essentially the question your book seeks to address or answer is why U.S. foreign policy displays such continuity across administrations, and just how American democracy and the rule of law has declined inversely with the rise of the U.S. empire. And sort of seeking to answer that question, you introduced the concept of what you call a tripartite state. Could you define what that means and what three parts of the state you're referring to?
Well, the idea of the reasons for looking at the continuity of government were the continuity of policy, let's say, across administrations really was hammered home to me after Obama was elected with a slogan of change you can believe in. And I worked on his campaign staff, and I thought that, even if he wasn't going to bring about some radical revolutionary change, that there would be some change. I wouldn't have guessed it would have been continuity you can believe in. That was the case. And this really was a bit shocking to me, because about the time I graduated college is the Bush years. The Bush years are, right about this time. And so it was 8 years of really criminal leadership. So it's not just the continuity of policy, but the fact that the U.S. Government commits things that are crimes all the time as a matter of course. Like the Iraq War was a clear violation of the UN Charter, blatantly illegal, as was the torture and the massive surveillance, and even the way that Bush got into office in Florida. And so the expectation was, or the hope was, that the new administration would apply the rule of law, and that alone would lead to some changes in American politics. When that didn't happen, it made me go back and look at all of these things. And I eventually start to read more radical scholars who look at issues like the Kennedy assassination and U.S. involvement in the drug trade and U.S. connections, the connections between the security state and organized crime. And it leads me to other authors who look at the state as not being this democratic, liberal state, but as operating in more of a top-down fashion and in more of a lawless fashion. And so it made me look at a small but very punchy literature of people who looked at what they would call the dual state, which was the security state and the public state, more or less. And with that, I made a bit of a modification to that, or an alteration to that, which was to say that it was really more a tripartite kind of concept that we want to think of with the regime that we live under. You have the security state, you have the FBI, you have the CIA and the Pentagon and so on, and you have the democratic state, public officials who are elected, right? But so many decisive moments seem to be to work out in favor of something deeper, something that represents a sort of top-down power in society, and that it is even more secretive than just the security state. It's this concept of deep political power that is usually repressed, things that are related to politics that are repressed rather than acknowledged in public discussions. And this borrows from Peter Dale Scott, who I'd say is probably my biggest influence, and he's been working on this stuff since the early 1970s. And this is just a way to try to understand the way that the U.S. functions as a dictatorship, as an imperialist power, and as kind of a dictatorship top-down with a democratic facade. And so I found this tripartite state structure, this theoretical construct, to be a way to put this into social science terms, so that we're not just having these sort of sterile, sanitized conversations about history, and a history that's often a kind of counterfeit history of major events, especially since the end of World War II. So this is what I was trying to do, and that was the inspiration for it.
When you present an argument that essentially that there is this continuity of governance in America that remains in power and pursues its own goals regardless of who is elected at any level, I think people rebel at that, and they'll point to certain things like, oh well, George W. Bush Bush, he started the war in Iraq, and Obama like ended the war in Iraq. So like, how can you say there's no difference? But I think that's an important point you made originally. The fact that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were not prosecuted for starting the war in Iraq should tell you that like who's really in charge, right? Because it's just like, if everyone understands that the war in Iraq, this is now like you can admit on CNN or the New York Times that the war in Iraq was a mistake, right? I mean, that's about as far as they'll go. Well, you know, the implications of that are never followed up on. Like, the people who made that mistake are never held responsible. Whereas, you know, if you were driving a tractor trailer like cranked out of your mind on speed and caused a 10-car pileup and killed 15 people, you would go to jail. Even though, hey, it was a mistake, I was just doing my job, you're still criminally responsible for that. Whereas, you know, like the criminality of like the crimes committed in service of this, you know, whatever you want to call it, deep state, or just, you know, like the power politics, the national security state, people who do crimes in service of that are never held to account. And, you know, so like the continuity is not so much in the changing of leaders, but it's in the like, just basically blanket protection for the people who carry out this agenda.
And this is something that overrides what should be the incentives of a two-party democracy. At least you would think.
Really? I was
that
totally off on that break.
If one party commits blatant crimes, then like commonsensically, it would be to the other party's advantage to prosecute and adjudicate these crimes, because then they can say, hey, we're not criminals, and the other side is, right? I mean, this is pretty obvious, and yet it never happens. And so
I'm not an expert.
this needs to be examined as to why this is the case. And it's to clarify here, we're not talking about just international law with the you know, the UN Charter and other laws that are considered to be part of that whole superstructure of international law, which has no, you know, ruling authority to really control it very well. But it's like, you know, understood what international law is and that the U.S. violates it. That's kind of commonly understood. But the important thing to keep in mind with the Iraq War and other acts of the U.S. empire is that these violate the supremacy clause of the Constitution, because we ratified the UN Treaty. Has been signed by the U.S., ratified by the U.S., and it outlaws international aggression. So these are they're violating domestic laws routinely when they overthrow governments, when they wage dirty wars, when they wage overt invasions like the Iraq War. These are actual crimes according to the U.S. Constitution, and they don't get prosecuted. And so this has to be taken into account, or at least acknowledged. Why are these people above the law, and what can we extrapolate from that?
In thinking about like this tripartite state, like the public state, which represents our front-facing democratic institutions, the security state, and then like the deep state. Like, is it that like one has supremacy over the others, like it's a hierarchy, or does it function more like co-equal branches serving the same agenda? Like, is it so much the issue of like one branch of this having supreme control over the others, or is it like that they all balance and sort of equalize each other's interests and working in concert?
Well, the way I describe it in the book and in an article that I got published in Academic Journal back in 2015 is that it's best conceived of as like a Venn diagram. And so the deep political power, which you could call it the deep political system, that's what Peter Dale Scott called it before, you know, in earlier parts of American history.
Oh my God.
Where you would have some governance and enforcement carried out through legitimate and then illegitimate means, through legal and illegal extra-constitutional ways. You had power that was like not so much acknowledged and could be effectual, but it wasn't. It was something that coexisted with the democratic state. I believe that after World War II, when the decision was made that the U.S. was going to go for a global empire after World War II, and this was a decision reached by economic elites who were somehow charged with planning America's entry into World War II. The Council on Foreign Relations paid for all of this, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Council on Foreign Relations carried it out, but the Council on Foreign Relations is like Rockefeller money. They did this War and Peace Studies project to plan U.S. entry into World War II, and the vice president at the time of the CFR was Allen Dulles, and in some ways he's kind of like the real face of the U.S. empire and the way that it was constructed. And he was a corporate lawyer, but also a spook, you know, an oil intelligence guy, a corporate lawyer, and later the ultimate intelligence officer in the United States. And during this time period, in order to pursue this global empire, they create institutions like the IMF to help manage capitalism, and the World Bank, and the UN to help to resolve international disputes. But there's also the CIA is created. And that is something that allows the US to operate in an imperial top-down fashion while still pretending to be a democracy, so that you have problems that you can't work out diplomatically, like Iran 1953 and the issue of Iranian oil being nationalized. Then you can send in the spooks to overthrow the government and put in a puppet, to really bolster U.S. hegemony. So this,
In a quarter mile, turn right onto the Maryland 4 South ramp.
and there were people at the time who thought that the better way to handle some of these issues, these early CIA issues like the election in Italy, for example, was to have private people handle this sort of things that shouldn't be done with the government. But other people like
Turn right onto the Maryland 4 South ramp.
Allen Dulles spun out, and it becomes the purview of the CIA to carry out these sorts of operations. And I think that the effect of this gradual over
Continue for 9 miles.
time is to transform the state such that it's appropriate to talk about a deep state rather than just a deep political system, or a political system that's occasionally corrupted by outside forces. That these forces get enshrined within the state, become a part of how we're governed, and have enormous power to determine outcomes and then to lie about it, such that we have, there are big parts of our history that we don't even really have a very clear picture of. And so this is where I see it transforming the state. And so I think the tripartite state model and the idea of a deep state is something that evolves over time, but you see the way that it unfolds. That's what I try to lay out in the book, especially starting with chapter 6, the history, and between the end of World War II and Ronald, and mark it with the beginning of Ronald Reagan, with his election. I think his election represents really the kind of the culminating event for the deep state to really be firmly in the driver's seat and pretty much free of restraints that a democratic system might impose on these kinds of activities.
Now, obviously, the term deep state has become very much in vogue in recent politics and our current discourse, and it's a much abused term. It's become kind of shorthand for being a crank. So you must encounter this, like when people skeptical of the idea of a deep state, where they just hear Donald Trump or like Donald Trump and his supporters when any analysis or discussion of the deep state is a meaningful factor in American life and world affairs. I mean, what would be like the easiest example? What would be the easiest way to describe it in a way that as a pushback against this idea that is solely the province?
In 8 miles, use the left 2 lanes to turn left onto Town Center Boulevard.
Right. This is a very, very serious course in history.
Right. Well, a lot of people, even if you are vaguely liberal-ish, they recognize that elections don't really change the overarching U.S. foreign policy and grand strategy, and so that's something that really has to be explained. It's too bad that, and there's additionally so many examples of lawlessness of the U.S. over time, domestically and internationally. COINTELPRO, chaos, the Contra crack scandal. I mean, you can go on and on here. There's all these Black Lives Matter people who died in weird ways. There's the death of Michael Hastings. There's a lot of events there's the Epstein thing. There's a lot of events that cannot really be satisfactorily explained with a generic pluralist model of U.S. politics like we hear in political science. So more people will talk about the deep state these days, or they'll say something else to that effect. Trump has sort of bastardized the term, and I could be, Peter Dale Scott, he was the first U.S. scholar to use the term very much, and he has talked about how regrettable it is that Trump has done this. And I think that in a way it's regrettable. On the other hand, we're so dominated in a top-down fashion by the regime that we live under, and so fragmented. Even the people that are radically against things can't really form any kind of consensus or political bloc that's coherent. That I don't
has his hand on the his hand on the wheel of the state, and that he is shaping the direction of foreign policy, and that he gets to make decisions, yes or no, on big issues regarding war and peace, poverty and prosperity. Like, it's more reassuring to think that than to imagine that essentially Trump, like Obama and Biden and George W. Bush, like, they can, I don't know, maybe steer the ship of state 5 degrees in one direction or another, but for the most part, like, big decisions are not really in their purview of things that they can, like, as commander-in-chief, they can say yes or no to.
Well, I think Bill Kristol even wrote on Twitter something to the effect of like, hey, I prefer the deep state over Trump, any day. And I thought that was strange. I think it's hard to say what to make about the way people feel about these issues. People are so I think Americans are extremely unaware of the political economy of America as a global empire. And so we don't, because our institutions do not explain these things to us. And so we really do not get the significance of many events that go on, because you can spend a whole lot of time studying these things and find them, be more confused in some respect than when you started, because it's complex history. There's a lot of big issues that are kind of not accessible in terms of like the actual decision-making processes. But why do people want to think that these leaders are in charge? I mean, they're told that all the time. So it's perhaps more comforting to believe in democracy, and you're getting that reinforced all the time by the news. The horse race coverage, for example, implicitly is kind of an assertion that it matters somehow who wins. And then there's the other issue of like conspiratorial explanations for it. And I never wanted to be like the conspiracy guy or whatever. I think that the empirical evidence is such that covert, clandestine, politics is part of the way that we're governed, and so it needs to be taken into account, and it has some serious implications that the state can avail itself of extra constitutional violence in order to get the political outcomes that it wants. And so if that's the case, then it needs to be taken into account, because in that kind of a system, it doesn't make too much sense to be obsessed with elections.
Drive the goddamn speed limit here, man.
When you're not really living in a democracy where the rule of law prevails, where the state can just intervene in these ways.
Don't break two laws at once.
That have happened have really serious ramifications, and we don't really hash them out. I mean, for example, the Frank Olson murder in 1953. That guy was Wormwood. The documentary on that just came out on Netflix a few years ago. 60 years after the fact, and it took that long for it to become kind of understood that it was related to biological warfare, that he was going to expose that the U.S. was using biological warfare in Korea, and so they dose him with acid, and they eventually end up apparently tossing him out of a window. And the guy that comes to settle the dust there with the authorities, the local police, the guy running the hotel, the person that was sent on behalf of the CIA was James McCord, the Watergate burglar, and the guy who also was involved in domestic operations to discredit the Fair Play for Cuba committee back in the 60s under the Kennedy administration.
I mean, Aaron, when you look into this, the rhyming, it's just like you describe the tripartite state as kind of a Venn diagram, but like reading your work and stuff, like with McCord or like these individuals have a lot of overlapping sections of the circles that they operate in. It just they keep pulling up over and over again.
Right. Some of these guys are amazing. It's not to say that like, aha, I know who's running it. It's James McCord. He's just more of a cog in this whole thing. But the fact that there's this class of people that are out there doing these things, it points to a secretive.
In half a mile, use the left 2 lanes to turn left onto Town Center Boulevard.
Arrangement within our system of governance. And
Cox country, man.
Given that, the idea of reflexively dismissing people who talk about state criminality as conspiracy theorists is
brother, I've never been to this one.
But I mean, I think that's by design. It's a way to sort of discredit this way of
use the left 2 lanes to turn left onto Town Center Boulevard.
Pointing out the criminality of the state. It's it's a
I have no idea where
powerful
we are.
kind of propaganda tool to help to shore up the regime. But it's everybody's a conspiracy theorist now. I mean, that was Jack Bradich, professor at Rutgers. He said that. And when you think about it, like with Russiagate and the global communist conspiracy and the global war on terror, you know, the conspiracy of Al-Qaeda all the time. I mean, in reality, like most of what a lot of U.S. foreign policy and now even partisan politics is based on dueling conspiracy.
You mentioned Peter Dale Scott before, but also I'd say like him and C. Wright Mills are the two authors whose like work that you really build off of and like engage with. So I was just wondering if you could give, for our listeners, what like with C. Wright Mills and Peter Dale Scott, like how would you describe like the work that you're engaging with, and like how are you expanding and building on what these two thinkers have like previously laid out?
Well, I'll start with C. Wright Mills because he's chronologically the earlier one. He wrote The Power Elite in 1956, and he was inspired to write this after reading a book by a German named Franz Neumann, who came to the United States, who left Nazi Germany, and wrote this book called Behemoth, which was about the rise of National Socialism and how this advanced capitalist industrialized country turned into the Nazi state. And so Behemoth is kind of a callback to, or an allusion to Leviathan, right? The sovereign, as described by Thomas Hobbes. And C. Wright Mills read that and he thought that it troubled him. And
Continue on Town Center Boulevard for half a mile.
he wanted to understand how advanced capitalist democracies could move towards kind of a authoritarian or totalitarian or anti-democratic forms. So he wrote The Power Elite, where he argues that democracy is a facade and that really there's a class of elites at the top of the organizational hierarchies in the military, the political system, and big business that are more or less interchangeable or increasingly interchangeable, and that they have a coincidence of interest in this privately incorporated permanent war economy, which had only really emerged in the last decade as Mills was writing this,
the disabled
and that decision making was migrating to ever loftier and more secretive circles. People are aware of this on some level. They know that big decisions are being made and that they aren't making any, but they don't quite know what is going on. They also have there's a sense in society that there's a lot of rackets in society and that people are just making a lot of money by single-mindedly pursuing money, and that the people at the top are somehow quite different from the rest of us. So he was trying to hash all this out and did so really brilliantly, considering that he didn't have as much information at the time about it. I mean, he makes these allusions to facts that really get fleshed out later. He says things like the elite are especially adept at co-opting institutions that already exist, but when they need to, they will create all sorts of new institutions in order to get done what they want done. The CIA is something that fits that motive. It's created at the behest of Wall Street people, and it serves their interests
You've arrived.
extremely well. And he knew he was really on point with many of these things, and he was really vindicated.
I could do that.
How many more do you have? Where are you?
I think there's 2 more. I'm an hour away.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Ben?
Alexa.
You should be getting married by now.
Yeah, there's no need to get there. I'm like, there's no needs. Like, my goal was 3, but it's like, that's when check-in is for the hotel, but...
So when's your first thing tonight?
At like 7.
Oh, okay. Alright, so yeah. So he's gonna give us a quote, and they would basically put in more layers too, like that.
Okay.
What's it called? The Typex, I think. Like it's the stuff that you see when like new houses are being built and shit.
Okay.
It's like a protective layer. They would put like the plywood, and then that protective layer, and then the siding. And he would have to check to see if there's like a stud hole. If not, they have to kind of frame it to be more simple.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it just kind of also depends on when they get in there and look at it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I was thinking whenever we have the date of the work, we should text Butch and Annie
Yes.
to let them know. And obviously the Cronies. And you know, I still had their keys, so I could let myself in.
Well, yeah, we should try to hold on to them for that reason.
Well, we'll still check them. But yeah, I was even thinking about that today, but I was like, he's fine. He could just measure it.
Yeah.
He's just gonna have to replace the whole side.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the only way. Right?
Yeah.
Luckily, it's just that side. You know, it's not like the whole thing.
That's really true.
And like the actual back side doesn't. It's, you know, it's fine seemingly. So I don't know why it's the back side. You know, like the backyard side is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. It's very odd.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway.
Okay.
Thanks so much for doing that, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm excited though. I got a text. So, like, first of all, Kurt called me this morning.
Love that.
And so I couldn't remember if the window for the. Like, it seemed weird that in my calendar I wrote the window as 9 to 12. I was like, maybe it's early at 8. So I, like, made myself paranoid. So I, like, was up and, like, ready to go at, like, 7:50.
Okay.
And, of course, he came at the very end of the window. But so then that's why I was talking to Corinne. So I was, like, didn't want to shower while I was waiting for them. Because, like, what if they showed up? And then when he called, he was like, oh, I'm, like, 20, 30 minutes away. So I was like, okay, I'll hop in the shower. So I just, like, waited around all day.
I like it's so nice when they do that.
Yeah, but I was, like, kind of annoyed with myself. Because I was like, I bet they'll call. But, like, if they don't know in my luck, I'll be, like, naked in the shower when they arrive.
Yeah, then it'll be annoying for everyone.
But the sleep study people texted me, so I'm going to go schedule that now.
Awesome.
So my insurance must have covered it.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I know we were discussing that the other day.
Yeah, so I'm going to do that. And then I think I'm going to go work my final hour at Ministry.
Ooh, great idea.
Yeah. I'm going to hang up, but have a great time.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Love you.
I love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Really on point with many of these things, and he was really indicated by subsequent events. I see Peter Dale Scott as working in that mode as well. He started to study things like the drug traffic in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War era, the beginning of the Vietnam War era, Kennedy assassination. He actually wrote an essay in the Pentagon Papers about how, based on what he was able to glean from the Pentagon Papers, that Kennedy must have had some sort of withdrawal plan that was reversed shortly thereafter. And he didn't even have all the documents, but he was able to glean this from what was in the Pentagon Papers. And this later gets confirmed by with declassifications like decades later, but Peter was really on point about this. And it's funny because Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky were telling Peter, you shouldn't put this in our Gravel edition Pentagon Papers, because you're suggesting that it matters who gets elected president, and that's bad politics. And Peter said, well, no, this is my interpretation of the document. So I mean, maybe there is some difference between these people. And Howard Zinn didn't want it to be published. Noam Chomsky, to his credit, said, okay, you can publish this. I believe this should see the light of day, so, free speech, and so on. So he was working in these veins. He called this stuff parapolitics, which is politics where accountability is consciously diminished. So this refers to covert operations where, for example, where the relationship between the mob and if you have the mob do certain operations, so it's deniable. Like all of these covert clandestine arts, these are called parapolitics. He eventually evolves into what he calls deep politics, which, as I said, is all of those things in politics that are usually repressed rather than acknowledged in public discourse. And so his work, The American Deep State, was written, and he put that out in 2015. He put out The Road to 9/11 in 2007, which is a really fantastic book. It's probably the one I would recommend Peter's work before. And I'm still doing stuff with Peter. We have a couple of anthologies of his writing that hasn't been published in one book before, and then one maybe classic Peter Dale Scott readers that we're hoping to get out as well. And we just published on AmericanException.com an essay that the CIA stole from him in 1970 on the drug trade, the Golden Triangle heroin trade, and the relationship between the CIA, the KMT, and American Wall Street elites. Basically, the CIA took it, and it never got to Ramparts. They were intercepting Ramparts.
But they just nicked it out of his mailbox or whatever.
I think on the way to Ramparts, I would guess. However, they were getting
it just got lost in the mail.
Right. He never heard from them again because this is before email. He just sort of figured that they got it. Maybe they didn't want to publish it or whatever, so it didn't get published. And but they posted it for whatever reason. Maybe JFK Records Act made them declassified. But it was actually posted on the CIA website, and I downloaded a copy. They subsequently took it down, but I got this and I showed it to Peter. I'm like, Peter, this essay is here online, and you wrote this. He's like, I did write that. And, what happened to this essay? And so we reworked that, and he studied this same subject for decades, so he actually knows a lot more about it. And it was a 2010 book that really expanded on these particular aspects, the World Commerce Corporation setting up the heroin connection even before the CIA did, with the help of Rockefeller, William Donovan of the OSS, and so on. So it's like he was working on these things for decades, and it's just an amazing kind of arc of his life to be working in these territories for so long, and not that many people did. He was a tenured English professor, and so he used his tenure, which most academics sadly really don't in a good way, to write about these issues, even as he was also working in poetry and other things. And, he's just an amazing character. He's recovering from COVID, and we're hoping he's going to make a full recovery soon because we're getting ready to do some Watergate stuff with him, Jim Hogan, very, very soon. We had to postpone it, but he's just been a huge inspiration and a great friend and mentor.
Well, I mean, one thing that's unmistakable, reading your work or Peter Dale Scott, is the conception of the Central Intelligence Agency and really the entire intelligence state as basically a form of organized crime. I mean, I've said before, like, if you want to understand the CIA, it's kind of like they're the WASP mafia. And, like, that extends, not just assassinations and narco trafficking and control of black markets, or many criminal allies that they use as their cat squad to carry out these kind of, covert operations around the world. But I'm saying, like, functionally, as a matter of charter, they exist to break the law. They break the law every day on a scale that is astonishing. I have a quote here from your book. In 1996, a House Intelligence Committee report stated that CIA officials had revealed that the agency's operation arm is the only part of the intelligence community, indeed of the government, where hundreds of employees on a daily basis are directed to break extremely serious laws in countries around the world. The conservative estimate is that several hundred times every day, Directorate of Operations officers engage in highly illegal activities. So, like, I mean, like, yeah. So you just talk a bit about, like, this sort of, like, the function of the CIA is basically
that was bad driving
criminal
on my part.
organization on behalf of Wall Street empire.
No.
How is it structured? Can it be understood as a kind of a mafia family?
I mean, I think the organized crime thing is a pretty easy analogy. It's not perfect in a way, but organized crime itself really deserves some more interrogation. The organized crime, another way to describe it, most of the time is tolerating crime. I mean, if you've ever seen Boardwalk Empire, I think that show is really the deep political system. I think that he may have read his Peter Dale Scott, actually, because the guy is like, he's intertwined between the economic elite, the political system, and the underworld of organized crime. And that's sort of how it existed in many ways before the creation of the CIA. And the CIA precursor, the OSS, they sprang Meyer Lansky, at Meyer Lansky's request, they sprang Lucky Luciano from jail.
Yeah,
Operation
and he could come back and run the New York courts. I mean, like, under the auspices of this idea that, like, we don't want German U-boats docking in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Navy Yard or whatever. But I was like, correct me if I'm wrong, it was really about keeping labor unrest under wraps while the war was going on, and like basically exclusively been communist-aligned unions in the stevedores and longshoremen.
Yeah, the longshoremen are kind of some of the more badass union people. They're like kind of more typically just straight up communists, and they're because of their position in commercial systems, they have some power, and so they can afford to make some demands and extract some concessions from capital. So that was the way they were brought in during World War II. But what and this is Peter has written about this in American War Machine, and this is I think really notable. Before the CIA is even really authorizing anything or doing business and covert operations, you have ex-OSS guys, so intelligence guys, like William Donovan, like I just mentioned, and Walter Stevenson, aka Intrepid, right? And we're in this World Commerce Corporation with financing from Rockefeller and John McCloy and other people, setting up the heroin traffic with KMT in the Golden Triangle area before the CIA really authorizes this, and is probably dating back even before the CIA is created. But when you see this, you see that it's done by the overworld of corporate wealth, and so they're brought in a way to. They're working hand in glove with the organized crime rings that are responsible for bringing all the drugs into the United States. And while they're doing this, the U.S. authorities are blaming communist China. They're saying Mao is flooding us with heroin. It was Chinese people, but it was Taiwan. It was the KMT, the Kuomintang. It was our guys with help from the CIA. And so this relationship between organized crime and the CIA takes it to another level. They use these guys to try to kill Castro. Probably some of these people and arrangements were involved in the Kennedy assassination. I mean, Jack Ruby is the obvious case, concerned sex club owner who shoots Oswald. I mean, it's so over the top, and in many ways that they not only function as organized crime because they are organizing the crime, they work with organized crime a lot, and in their earlier forms, similarly before there was a CIA, these entities worked with organized crime. But they think about the way they were created was it's very vague. They're empowered by the National Security Act, but they weren't empowered really it's what was actually done with the authorization that they were given does not conform to what is in the document. It says that the CIA will also from time to time carry out some other duties as assigned by the National Security Council and National Security.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like a chorus that's repeated in this song over and over again, is like the U.S. empire getting involved in wars either directly or by proxy in parts of the world that they consider strategically important. And beginning with, like you said, the Golden Triangle heroin trade in Vietnam. Well, one of the big blowbacks from Vietnam was a huge explosion of heroin addiction, both for returning troops and in American cities. Well, where was that heroin coming from? You jump ahead to the 80s, the dirty wars in Central America. How do you fund all of these secret operations? Well, it just so happens at the exact same time there's a huge explosion of cocaine and crack addiction in American cities. And then, back to Afghanistan. Now there's an opiate crisis in America because, Afghanistan, it's where were all these poppies getting grown? And again, who is controlling these black markets? And then, like I said, the chorus of the song is the same every time. It gets repeated throughout.
Yeah, Joe Rogan. It was funny. I don't watch a whole lot of Rogan unless he's got somebody on there that I'm interested in hearing. Just because I'm steeped in these areas, so it's it's not my go-to source or whatever. But he said at one point in one of the things I saw, he said, "Yeah, I mean, this drug money, it's out there. Do you think that these bankers are just going to leave that on the table because it's immoral? Of course, that goes into the system." He says something to that effect, and I think that that's exactly right. There's three commodities internationally that are the most lucrative in terms of trading. That is, the top is oil, and then weapons, and then drugs. And when you think about that,
well, yeah, they're just gonna one side of that triangle. They're just gonna be like, "Oh, we're not gonna touch that." Yeah, that's drugs. That's illegal. Unlike, for instance, arms sales or petroleum, where you get it out of the ground.
Yeah, I mean, but they're intertwined sometimes because, if you think about Afghanistan, pipeline routes were a part of that calculation, and then weapons. It's an expensive boondoggle to occupy that country for decades, and you have the drugs, of course, as well. A big part of that. And where does that money money end up? Because the dollar is the international currency, and it has been for so long. The drug trade and organized crime itself cannot but strengthen the U.S. financial system because it moves huge funds around in the financial system and creates massive pools of capital to the point that was probably drug money that saved the economy to the extent that
That's
it
what
was
kept it
saved.
from completely collapsing in 2008. Right? It was just the huge amounts of U.S. currency that's held, in black markets overseas.
Yeah, it's Old Faithful. I mean, it's Old
Yeah.
Faithful money geyser for the deep state, more or less, or deep political system of capitalism.
I guess okay. To move on slightly, I want to talk briefly about this dichotomy that you attribute to Peter Dale Scott, but the Prussian trader dichotomy when it comes to foreign policy elites and American government and intellectual discourse, breaking down between sort of the neoconservative and neoliberal. Both of these groups are incredibly hawkish and regard America as an empire, and they think that that's just and the way it should be. But how do you define the distinction between the Prussians, aka sort of what we generally regard as hawks, and the traders, which are the neoliberals, which are, I guess, more commonly perceived of as doves? But the point is, this is just one hawk. This is just one bird of prey.
Right. I think that this is especially salient in the period from the 50s to the 70s. The conflicts between some of these camps. We call them neoliberals and neoconservatives, or Prussians traders. That's an older one. But there's much more overlap than there is difference. And in the Prussians as a group, or the neoconservatives, really arise out of the decision that I think is a result of the capitalist elites to create the military-industrial complex, to deal with all the problems of integrating the post-war economy in the capitalist world. They come up with the idea of the privately incorporated war economy and the permanent war economy, and the military-industrial complex as a kind of engine to keep the dollars flowing in the right way and help the East Asia, like Japan. The Korean War is a huge boost for Japan, and for South Korea and for Taiwan, and to have Western Europe not trading with Russia. And that's where we see this same business today and the way that this was laid out. But a consequence of these people like Dean Acheson, who's really a kind of a Rockefeller type of person, who's really someone who's thinking up in terms of global capitalism and how to manage it, is they create this military-industrial complex that itself becomes an important factor in American power politics. Now,
dude, that feels so weird. I gotta take this all with my I feel the sodium, honestly. I mean, I can feel the sodium right now. I gotta eat more healthy. Heading in shouldn't be too bad. Do you want to check out that Walmart? I don't know, man. I guess I will. What's this do? It's interesting. Oh, it feels really good. Woo. Wow.
a quarter mile, turn right. Take the next left, then turn right. The next left, then you will arrive at your destination.
Oh shit, sure.
Watergate. It removes him, and then there's some chaos.
Take the next right onto Solomon's Island Road North.
But I think that Watergate gets resolved in such a way as the neoconservatives, but also financial elites, are kind of placated in different
Continue on Solomon's Island Road North for 3/4 of a mile.
ways, and they come to the things that they were worried about with the end of the Vietnam War. The military's kind of paranoid about Nixon going to China and the Vietnam War ending and military budgets perhaps going down, and the sort of commercially minded people, the traders or neoliberals like Rockefeller, they're a little worried about Nixon and his protectionism, which could damage the global economy that they've set up, and his price controls and other methods, and even his friendliness to labor. Like all of these things, all the different sides of this are going at Nixon, and Nixon is removed.
And do you think it's a coincidence that Nixon was the last American president at a time of inflation and rising gas prices to even consider the idea of price controls?
Yeah, I mean, he put them in, right? I mean,
yeah.
And that's not even really discussed now. And this was, I think that there are some of the elements of this time period of the 70s that we might remember or be aware of, but that have greater significance. And I think one of them is the Gerald Ford. There was a New York Post headline that said Ford to New York City drop dead. Dead. And it was a reference to the bondholders that were like essentially assuming a new role in New York City to like dictate the fiscal solvency of the city. And this is a sort of neoliberal. This is almost like a IMF kind of situation, but for an American city. And so I think that this represented a change in the U.S. To a kind of
In a quarter mile, continue straight onto Maryland 4 South, Solomon's Island Road South.
Liberalism. But in addition, the neoconservative forces, beginning really under Carter, although Reagan's credited for it, a huge military buildup. And this is in this way, the consolidating the dollar regime worked out the conflicts between the neoliberals and the neoconservatives. But in doing so, you jettison whatever progressive elements there were.
Continue straight onto Maryland 4 South, Solomon's Island Road South.
In the American power structure, there's never another Democrat who's even
Continue on Maryland 4 South for 22 miles.
as progressive as Lyndon Johnson or as Nixon. Like Nixon is, I mean, like Chomsky says, Nixon was the last liberal.
I mean, like, and this goes back to this idea of continuity, and this idea that, like, you know, yes, two parties compete for the position of manager of the empire, but essentially they are competing within an artificially constrained, like, you know, paddock of acceptable policy. And, you know, whether it's why the fact that, like, you know, the Pentagon budget goes up every single year. And it, like, it is, like, how, since the end of the Cold War, like, how much has the Pentagon budget, like, grown exponentially since the Soviet Union collapsed? Like, its only reason for existing. that money is never, ever going to be spent in America on things that are like, broadly popular and like would be democratically successful policies, i.e., some sort of universal health care program, or in a smaller ball, just things like price controls for dealing with inflation on things like gas. These things, no matter what party, no matter how progressive the person is or conservative they ran as, these things are just never ever considered, nor will they be, because of this deep political system that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Clinton took office, and he's a corruptible guy. I think that they knew they probably had that he wasn't going to be out there and out of control. But he took office.
He had corruptible tattooed on his forehead. It's about it.
Yeah, he likes women. Who knows what sort of sexual blackmail stuff they have on, whatever. But at any rate, when he was elected, he reportedly wanted to do some more New Deal type things and kind of deal with some of the excesses of the Reagan-Bush years. And early on, I guess probably shortly after he was inaugurated, Robert Rubin and Alan Greenspan take him on a little walk around the White House to give him the talk, and they explained to him like, no, you're not going to do that, Mr. President. And so Bill Clinton, he's quoted in like it's the mainstream magazine, maybe the New York Review books is where this was quoted, but he says, "You mean to tell me that I owe my re-election chances to the Federal Reserve and a bunch of fucking bond traders?" And the answer was yes, that's right. You can't do that. So I think now it's so structural that it's not like you think, oh, I'm going to necessarily get him assassinated. It's like that the levers of power are so firmly in the hands of these people that they're going to determine whether I succeed or fall. Reagan was their man from the beginning. When you look at Reagan versus Carter, I mean, two things that were totally top down that helped Reagan's economy enormously. The controlled oil prices, which were controlled by client states and the oil companies, and the interest rates, which is the Federal Reserve, the independent Federal Reserve, which is independent when in the U.S. politics is always code for establishment or even deep state. You want to put a finer point on it. And so these are the ways that power operates.
I did not even break. That was
not
cool.
That the president or Congress couldn't do it. It's that
wow. What a machine! Damn.
They don't have the. They know that is a way of being. I think on some level. I mean, they just know not. I mean, Obama said that himself to a group of fundraisers. Supposedly, they asked him why he didn't keep more of his progressive promises. And this is a secondhand story from Ray McGovern, former CIA officer. But Obama reportedly said, well, look at what they did to Martin Luther King. And so, make of that what you will.
I guess I want to turn to C. Wright Mills. And one of C. Wright Mills' most powerful ideas, one of his most famous, nuggets, is the idea of crackpot realism. And it's a very powerful idea, and it sums up a lot of the Cold War. The point being that you could rationally create a system that through the rational maintenance of it, at every step you are, behaving logically, but at each step you just start bringing the world closer to annihilation. That you could potentially bring about the end of the world through rational means. And I'm wondering, given your understanding of that, or that heuristic through viewing policy and the behavior of the American state, is crackpot realism alive and well today? And where should we look in the world or in U.S. policy today to see further evidence of this crackpot realism?
I mean, yeah, of course it is, because look at some of these policies that we have seen in recent years. The coup in Ukraine, which people warned about, people like Mearsheimer, this will be perceived as an enormous threat to the Russians, and this is going to result in disaster. Even the current CIA officer, or CIA head, right, Burns or whatever, back in the day, he said something very similar, like in 2008 or 9. This came out through WikiLeaks, but there's a memo where he's saying that every person in Russia sees Ukraine as existentially important to Russia, and that the idea of them joining a Western bloc is just anathema and terrifying. So these things were out there, but the idea of expansion and containment, I think containment of never really ended as an idea. In fact, if I can get the podcast going and successful enough, I really would like to be able to write a sequel to American Exception, where I get into what happens after Reagan takes over in geopolitical terms for the U.S. And the more that I think about it, I'm kind of maybe spoiling my own book here, but I think that those rollback crazies of the 50s and 60s that wanted to roll back this under Reagan, and that the fall of the Soviet Union, which happened partly because of collapsing the oil prices at the perfect time, almost down to zero. I mean, like where oil was like in single digits, right? And that this mentality of like sticking it to Russia, making sure that they could not only dismembering the Soviet Union, but also damaging Russia and weakening them to the point that they could never rise again. That this was sort of maniacally pursued by the national security state, and we see it in its most above board in the expansion of NATO and putting these missiles around Russia, which they initially said were for Iran to protect against Iran, but everybody knew it was for Russia. And then also in these weird, dirty wars involving Al-Qaeda all throughout the 1990s, and where the U.S. uses Al-Qaeda as its kind of sock puppet in Bosnia, Kosovo, Chechnya, Azerbaijan. They tried to use the Al-Qaeda people to assassinate Gaddafi in 1997, MI6 being involved there. And then the Afghanistan war has to be seen as also as a way of like getting into that area, getting into Eurasia. And it's a kind of like a rollback or forward projection of U.S. power into more and more of the world. And that, I think, is very much a type of crackpot realism, and it shows that has been the operant worldview and mentality since for the last few decades. And it brought about, I think, the end of the Soviet Union in some ways, and also the aggressive U.S. actions after that they wanted to get rid of the bipolar world order to establish a unipolar world order with America as ruling the world in perpetuity. And if you want to read some vintage crackpot realism, Project for a New American Century, Rebuilding America's Defenses, it's that mentality is it's still with us. It didn't go away in C. Wright Mills after C. Wright Mills died.
All right, I guess, Aaron, this is my last question for you today. So, like, taking what we've discussed, like, understanding that, we are citizens of a country that is, at best a managed democracy, and, in all likelihood, a totally fake. But at the same time, we are still citizens of this country. We are still, in some sense, responsible for the conduct of, the world we live in, or the place we find ourselves in. So, like, what would, like, as an individual citizen, I know that doesn't leave people with much, but what does effective resistance to, like, deep politics or the deep state look like? Is it even possible? And, like, what lessons can we draw about what is sort of a productive way to talk about, or even, like, resist and fight back against, like, these forces that we're talking about?
Well, you're talking about the most powerful empire in human history, the wealthiest and the deadliest, really, in terms of its real and potential, violent power. So it's kind of accepting our powerlessness in some way, because we don't really live in a democracy, and somehow internalizing what that means. I think in a way it can kind of get us to recognize that the stakes for some of these political arguments are not so high because we are so disempowered. And so coming at peace with these things is important. I think not lying to yourself is important, not lying to people around you. Tell the truth as much as possible. Take care of yourself and people around you to the extent that is possible, and wait until conditions change, because I think that, historically speaking, world historic events are going to relegate the U.S. empire to the same state of all other empires in history. Empires fall, and that is going to happen, and hopefully this human civilization isn't ended in the process, although that's a real possibility because we have a uniquely destructive set of weapons. But just accepting these, trying to grapple with reality as best you can, as much as you can, and speaking to people around you, being out, if you're in a public forum, talk about things like the criminality of the state, and try to be as optimistic and realistic as you can about all of these issues, knowing that we don't live in a country where there's the ability for regular people to impact power. And it's harsh. It's a harsh reality, but in a way, it's a little bit. There are aspects of it that are liberating, because you can't get too upset about things that you can't control, or at least you can know that you should. So it's not. I would love to be able to say, like, if you do this, then that'll solve the problems. But unfortunately, I I think that as things are going to, if there's going to be change, it's going to be because of international changes to the structure of the system, because that's the basis of all their power anyway, is control over the global political economy. And I think that that's slipping out of their hands. And I don't know where it's going after that, but it's certainly interesting and exciting.
Well, President G, if you're listening to this show, you know what to do. Thank you very much, Aaron Good. I want to thank you for your time. If people would like to get a copy of American Exception or read any other of your work, what should they do? Where should they go?
The book you can find, American Exception, Empire in the Deep State, you can find at places where you buy books. And I have an AmericanException.com website with a small number of articles. We plan to get more up there. Especially the American Exception podcast on Patreon. We have a lot of stuff on deep politics and the political economy of U.S. empire and related subjects that if you found this discussion interesting, you would probably like the podcast. So I would urge you to subscribe, and you can hear more there.
Links for all the above will be in the episode description. Aaron Good, once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Will.
I'm Danny Bessner here with my comrade Derek Davison, and we are excited to be bringing you this week's news roundup. As always, there's a lot of news in the world, so why don't we just get going? Derek, there was a recent presidential election in Kenya. What do we need to know about it and why?
Yes. Right up front, I would like to say that with Saudi Aramco having reported a $48 billion profit in the last fiscal quarter, if they're interested in sponsorship deals, our rates are surprisingly affordable. So give us a call if you're at Aramco. But yes, that aside, there was a Kenyan election last week. It took several days, took almost a full week actually to finally release the official votes, or the official vote tally. It turns out that Deputy President William Ruto has been victorious. The official results have him taking a little over, or a little under, I should say, 50.5% of the vote. Former Prime Minister and multiple-time presidential candidate and loser Raila Odinga took around 48.5%. As I say, the ballot count took quite a while, excessively long by Kenyan standards. There was a parallel media count that was supposed to be going on at the same time as kind of a check on that process. That froze over the weekend. In other words, there are some irregularities here that have given Odinga's supporters cause to question whether or not these results are legitimate. Odinga himself labeled the results a travesty on Tuesday. He is intending to apparently take his case to the Kenyan Supreme Court. There were protests by his supporters in Nairobi and Kisumu on Monday after the results were announced. They seem to have subsided, but I would say tension is fairly high, and the possibility that they could resume is kind of lingering.
We are not going to accept and move on until Raila is the president. Raila is the president of the Republic of Kenya. We cannot accept Ruto's president.
On top of that, 4 members of Kenya's Electoral Commission came out on Monday after the official results were announced and essentially disavowed them. They said there were irregularities. I'm not sure how, what sort of irregularities they're talking about, but they cited irregularities that were ignored by the commission chair, and said they couldn't stand behind the results that were released. So there is another group called another Kenyan group called the Elections Observation Group, on the other hand, that says that the final results of the election were consistent with their own projections. They send poll watchers out basically to kind of do a sample of polling places around the country, and they seem to think that this outcome with Ruto kind of eking out a victory was consistent with what they expected. So it may be that the count was indeed legitimate and that this is the right outcome, but that still doesn't mean that there's not going to be trouble to come because, one side is not accepting the outcome.
What's the broader implications of this, or could you maybe just contextualize Kenya and what's going on there so our listeners who might not have been paying attention know why this election is important?
Yeah, Kenya is something of a rock of stability, I guess, in kind of Eastern Africa. They contribute peacekeepers / regional military forces to Somalia, for example, to deal with Al-Shabaab. And, they take some blowback from that. Al-Shabaab is fairly active, especially in northern Kenya. It does undertake attacks there. In a region where, Ethiopia is constantly at war with some faction within the country and seems to be on the verge of, full-blown civil war at any given time, where Somalia is, of course, a completely failed state at this point. For Kenya to kind of devolve into post-election violence, and if that were to get more serious, there have been cases of post-election kind of protesting and that sort of thing in Kenya previously, but if that were to get more serious, it would be not a great thing from a regional perspective.
Let's stick on elections and talk about the UK Prime Minister poll and what that augurs.
So, yeah, this is just briefly, there was a poll, if you've been following the race to succeed Boris Johnson, friend of the pod. There was a new poll by Opinium Research. I don't get it, but that's the name. Opinium Research, sorry, I'm having a hard time here. Showed UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, who's one of the two candidates remaining in this race, with a 22-point lead. This poll was just released this week over the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak. She's got 61% support among Conservative Party members who are voting by kind of secret.
So what would you do? Would you set it up before you leave?
To Sunak's 39%. The results of this election will be announced in early September, so this is a month-long process. But it certainly seems like Truss, she's outpulled Sunak at every turn in this race, so it certainly seems like she will be the next leader of the Conservative Party and therefore the next Prime Minister of the UK. Interestingly, over 60% of party members would rather Johnson just stick around than either of these two take his place. I think it was 63% in the case of Truss and 68% in the case of Sunak.
So it must feel like pretty trafficky there.
Would rather just
maybe I should skip it. I don't know.
Continue.
Maybe people go on the way out.
Whatever they're like.
Really.
Speaking of Prime Ministers, let's talk for 30-35 minutes about Sanna Marin's party. Derek.
Yes, it's a disgrace. She should be, she should be removed from office and made to be put in the stocks in the town square in whatever town, they decide to. Maybe they could do a traveling show where she's just pilloried with tomatoes and eggs and things for having a social life.
I think we should try to get her on the pod. Jake, keep this in. Let's get her on the pod. Could you reach out to Sanna Marin's people? As a fellow millennial, I think she's my exact age, so we'd have a lot to talk about. I think you should get her on the pod.
I think there's no reason why that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I think it's obvious for her.
And the Aramco deal, Jake. See if you can make the Aramco thing happen.
So let's turn to Ukraine. And Derek, there's a few updates there our listeners should be aware of.
Yes, so there are two things to talk about here. There's the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in kind of southeastern Ukraine, and there is the continuing kind of series of attacks that have been taking place, apparently attacks in Crimea. First on the nuclear plant, this is of course Zaporizhzhia is controlled by Russian forces, but it's right on the front line, so I mean literally like across the river, it's territory that's still under Ukrainian control, and there's a lot of clash along that front line, as you might expect. Some of it has spilled over or maybe intentionally targeted, who knows. The nuclear plant, the Ukrainians and the Russians have been blaming each other for what seems like a bad idea. Zaporizhzhia is the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. A disaster there, even though the chances of a disaster following from like a stray rocket or a stray artillery shell or something like that are fairly small.
And so it begins.
In 1,000 feet, use the left 3 lanes to turn left onto 3 Notch Road. Use the left 3 lanes to turn left onto 3 Notch Road.